Hi everyone, thank you for staying till the bitter end. We have got the graveyard shift, so it's nice to see so many of you stayed to hear us talk. I think we're just going to do a quick introduction. We've been asked to just explain what we look like for anybody that's watching this or is in the audience and is maybe not able to see what we look like. So I'm Angela Jobson. I am sat here today wearing a beigey cream jacket, black trousers, blonde-ish hair. And if I was stood up, I'd be 5'6". Over to you, Megan.
I'm Megan Wastell. I've got short red hair today. And I am wearing, I think, a somewhat fierce leopard print skirt and a white top and glasses.
So I'm not going to assume that everybody knows who Merlin Entertainments are. You may all, but just to give you a little bit of background about who we are and why we're here today. So Merlin Entertainments is what we call a location-based entertainment business. We have many attractions, it's real-life experiences. We've started in 1998. It's a UK-based company. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story just about how it started, and just gives you a little bit of a sense of sort of the ambition and the growth of the business. So it started in 1998 by a guy called Nick Varney. He was an FMCG marketer. He'd done a stint at Alton Towers as marketing director, and the attractions industry had got into his blood. He's a very ambitious, he's now retired, he's now very ambitious, very driven. He started the business, as I said, back in 1998 with a couple of sea life aquariums, a couple of dungeons, and he had this really big vision to chase the mouse, a certain mouse, whose name might begin with M. And 7 years later, after forming this company, he bought 4 Legoland parks. He bought a big theme park that we still operate over in Italy called Gardaland, and then a couple of years later bought the Two Swords group, which obviously runs the brand Madame Two Swords. And then here we are later, well, 26 years later, and we're now the second biggest location-based entertainment company in the world. That's 65 million visitors a year, and we're in over 140 countries. So that's pretty huge ambition and sort of realized quite quickly. So little bit of a story about where we've come from.
So today, Merlin is a collection of really beloved brands that we have the pleasure of working with from the brand perspective and from the creative perspective. And just to give you a little view of the structure of Merlin, so we have 2 kind of main areas of our attractions. One is resort theme parks, Alton Towers, Chessington, and Legolands, for example. And these are sort of outdoor, longer day experiences. They're resorts. A lot of them have hotels, and people stay overnight. And then we also have what we call gateway attractions, and examples of those are Sea Life or Dungeons or London Eye, for example. And those are kind of often indoor, shorter stay attractions that you can go through in an hour to 3 hours.
So if you didn't know Merlin, I'm pretty certain everybody knows at least a couple of brands, particularly in the UK. Most people have grown up sort of through our brands. So it's a very rich and diverse portfolio. We do everything from seahorses to Henry VIII to Taylor Swift. Like, the conversations we have are interesting and varied. I remember on my first day, sat in a meeting, and somebody was talking about a mega croc that was in an aquarium that we have over in Sea Life, and then talking about Jack the Ripper in our Dungeons attractions. And I was like, I came from the fashion industry. Like, this is the weirdest thing. But I think when you stop thinking it's weird, that's the time to leave, because there's obviously something special about what we do. But one of the things I think that is really special and is one of our strengths is that we work with and we create legendary IP, and we work with some amazing partners, and our strength is being able to turn those things that don't exist into real life into these real life experiences. And we're trusted by some really big and really beloved brands. You can see some of them on here. And again, like, the diversity is a key point that I would just call out, that we work with everything from preschool brands all the way through to massive brands like Star Wars and Marvel. So it's very varied, it's very rich, and it makes for some very interesting conversations and challenges sometimes. And it's all underpinned by a purpose, and this is a lovely purpose. This makes getting out of bed easy, because we genuinely believe that we exist to bring joy to people. people can spend time together and deepen the connections that they've got, and to make lasting memories. And that, I mean, I think you're going to hear some of that as we talk through some of our top tips today. Like this is our sort of reason for being, and it's quite a powerful thing. Everybody talks about purpose. This is a very emotive and very special purpose for us.
Yeah, and it really does infuse all of the work that we do as well. We do, as we look at the creative and we look at the brand and how we execute it, we often hark back to, is this work living our purpose? Does it create connections and joy and memory? So what a lovely thing to do every day. Right, so just briefly to kind of give you an understanding of who we are and what we do at Merlin. So I'm the Global Creative Director. I've been in this role for about a year now. I oversee the creative area, which is called Merlin Magic Making, or MMM for short. People often wonder what MMM is, but there you go, we're making magic. My team is quite diverse and interesting. So I have a team of creatives. I also have creative strategists, creative technologists, and producers who work for me, and that team does everything from designing roller coasters to master planning for Madame Tussauds. They do hotel and attraction design, and also design and conceive of food and beverage attraction as well. So it's really diverse, really interesting, and never a boring day. And I partner with Angela in the work that I do, so our team looks after the creative, and Angela owns the brand.
So I'll talk a little bit about my role, and as I said, Megan and I are absolute partners in terms of the work that we create and the roles that we play. I've been at Merlin for 10.5 years now. I came for maternity cover for somebody for 12 months, and I loved it so much I stayed, and I've done lots of different jobs. I've worked across lots of the brands that we have talked about. Primarily my job, if I kind of boil it down very simply, is in the brand team with a voice of the consumer. So who are they, what matters to them, and turning all of that into, for specifically the conversation we're having today, into brilliant briefs for Megan with exciting jumping off points for creative. So as we said, like, it's a very tight partnership. The brief and the output is obviously so closely interwoven.
Yeah. So we're very excited to share with you today. We thought we'd come and give a little structure and hope that you leave with some of our industry secrets and top tips. So we thought we would share 5 tips for creating world-class experiences, and it's been really fun for us to pull this together and really think about what are the pillars, what's the spine of the work that we do, and what do we always keep in the back of our mind. So our 5 tips are: know what makes your experience compelling, honor the essence of the brand, take your guests on a journey, lean into the uniqueness of real life, and always deliver time well spent. So we'll talk you through a little bit of those individually. The first one, know what makes your experience compelling. And this is where we spend an awful lot of our time. So we've created this little formula for what we think is a compelling product proposition. And this is the sort of the what of what we do. And we work together on this to really kind of nail this down before we put pen to paper, before we do any drawings, before we do any designs. We receive a brief and we work really hard on this compelling proposition. And our sort of secret formula is that we take the creative strategy, the concept or the theme, and the product truth. And those things combined will create for us this compelling proposition upon which all the creative is built.
And I think it's, well, I think because I've been at Merlin for 10 years, I sometimes forget that the sort of compelling proposition bit is not a thing that necessarily exists outside. And by that, the sort of definition of a compelling proposition is, what's the thing that somebody's going to read, see, or hear about that then becomes so unmissable and a must-do that they have to buy a ticket, like they have to get off their sofa and ensure that they go and do it. And I think it also needs to be really single-minded as well. So whenever anybody works for me and they come with a proposition or we're discussing something and it has an and in it, I'm like, that's not a compelling proposition. It needs to be one clear thing that's so exciting, but there's no room for an and.
Yeah,
that's too many things we're trying to communicate, so keep it simple.
So we thought we'd show you an example of what this is with an attraction of ours that has recently launched, which is Hyperia in Thorpe Park. Has anybody been on it? It's terrifying. Angela and I are both slightly terrified of roller coasters, so
I think we're supposed to keep that quiet.
yes, I'm working my way up to it. So yeah, we thought we'd share an example for you of how we went from creative strategy to execution of the concept. So yeah, we had a great brief that came through, and from that we build out a creative strategy.
Shall we talk a little bit about the brief? So this is Thorpe Park, as Megan said, and the audience for Thorpe Park is teenagers, and the insight is all around like testing and pushing to feel something, like testing boundaries. So this is the moment to hit the audience with adrenaline. So they're looking for something that basically makes them feel alive and like they've pushed themselves hard.
Yeah, and so when we got that brief, we pulled together this creative strategy, which is, I can't read it from here, but we're looking to try and really satisfy that hunger for the thrill, right? So that brings us to what is the product truth. Hyperia is the UK's fastest, tallest, and most weightless coaster. And so when we start to think of what the creative is, what that creative execution is, what is the strategy that sits under that, it's leaning into that product truth. And so for any attraction, we try and really uncover what is that product truth and how does the creative concept deliver on that. And so for this one, the team came up with this story of Hyperia, who is a goddess, an ancient river goddess, who conquers this fear of the unknown and grows her wings of steel to fly up into the heights of the sky, leaning into this product truth of it being the tallest and fastest.
And I think the way that we use those propositions is obviously it works for the product development, it works for our communication as well. And there's always just a balance of communicating what we call show the metal, which is like literally show the ride, like make sure people see what it is, and then tell the story. And the balance of that is always a debate, but you have to be able to show both of those things. But we also use the proposition as well when we're looking at what's the food offering that we serve, how should the staff behave. So it's the one thing that everybody should just stay true to and kind of just keeps bringing us back to, as I said, this one single idea, which is the sort of the compelling driver of all of this.
And we wanted to share one more example of this that isn't our own. This is an attraction that's out in the world, absolutely wonderful, Abba Voyage. And what I thought was really interesting, so this is the advertising, this is the poster that's out in the world. And I think what's incredibly interesting about this is that this is a holographic experience, so you go and see ABBA, and they are holographs. But what I think is really interesting here is that the advertising doesn't talk about the technology at all. It leans into what is this proposition, what is this experience, and that's what you sell. That's how you take that product truth and sell it. And for us, it's something that we really think about in experience design, specifically around technology. That technology is never the thing. Technology is never the thing you put on the poster. It's the enabler to the experience. It's the enabler to the product truth, and it's that emotional experience that you're always selling to your audience and that you're trying to deliver to your audience.
I don't know whether anybody in this room has been to this experience. I've been twice, actually, and I'm a tough customer, given the industry that I work in and the job that I've done for 10 years. If you haven't, I would really encourage everyone to go unless you really hate ABBA, just because it is a truly joyful experience. And if we think about the sort of what I talked about, how I describe and think about a compelling proposition, which is a thing that's so exciting that you would get up and go and do it. This is located not in central London. It's actually really quite difficult to get to, but this show is on twice a day and it's always fully booked. And I think what they've done, which is going to lead us on to our next point, but I think what they've done really well here is they've really captured the essence of what's so special about ABBA, and it's the fun and it's the fact that they're kind of for everybody, and you see that when you go into this experience. You've got multiple generations of families with their arms around each other, like swaying to Dancing Queen, and they've just brought that across the whole experience. It's not just, it is holograms, but it's them in their kind of in their heyday performing, which is obviously impossible because you're not going to be able to do that now, but it's everything else that they've built around it. It's the sort of the 360, it's the music and the lighting that they've done, and it's really spectacular. And I don't say this about many things, because I think I am, as I said, like I'm a tough customer when I visit other people's real life experiences, but this one is one where I'm like, they did this brilliantly. It costs a lot of money to do it, and it's all been purpose designed. The arena, they have a dance floor, so you can dance if you want, or you can sit down. But it's all been done so thoughtfully and sort of true to the essence of ABBA, which I think takes us on to the next point that we were going to make, which is when you're building live experiences, you really have to sort of get under the skin of the brand and what's special about it. So when we're talking about IPs and brands, we have lots of kind of different indicators that this is the right brand to work with. We're looking at things like, has it extended outside of where it initially started? What are the consumer product sales? There's lots of kind of those things that are really like hard indicators of this is a brand that's big enough for us to consider. But then Megan has a really nice kind of little litmus test, which sort of boils it down to like one question, which I think is really nice.
So this is my favorite question, to know if this is a brand that we think we can make an experience out of. And that question is, would somebody get that brand tattooed on their body? And if they would, it means that this is a brand that people have true passion for and true fandom for. And so we put this visual example here. This is actually some beautiful person on the internet who has tattoos of our attractions. This is Nemesis, which is a famous coaster of ours up at Alton Towers. And the logo of Alton Towers at the top there. And yeah, I had this wonderful experience when I first joined Merlin, and Nemesis was still in construction. It's since launched, but I went up to Alton and stood on this lookout to look down on the attraction as it was being built, and there were some guests who were standing up on the attraction looking down on it, talking about how they couldn't wait for it to launch. And I noticed that they had Nemesis tattoos on their body, and I thought, wow, oh my gosh, I'm working for a company and building attractions that people care about so much that they're scribbling them on their body. And I thought that is the perfect litmus test to understand if it's an IP, it's a brand that people will feel passionate about experiencing and surrounding themselves with. Yeah, so here's a few other examples of brands that we've brought to life and sort of how we start to approach distilling these brands into their essence and then sort of blowing them back up again. So each of these are brands that Merlin Magic Making has worked on. So Jumanji, the first one, what a fun thing to think about. How do you take this IP, how do you take this brand and make it into a real world experience? So Jumanji is at Chesington. We also have one at Gardaland. And this is a roller coaster experience, one that I was brave enough to go on, and just amazing. So here we focused on the giant jaguar's head, around the idea of being in the jungle, being completely immersed in this world, and also being kind of thrilled as you're in it. And if you've not been, it's a really lovely experience. Madame Tussauds, so Angela, I think you should talk about this one. Angela used to be in charge of the brand of Madame Tussauds, so she's got a lot of experience with famous IP.
I do. I mean, look, this is a slightly different example because the overarching Madame Tussauds brand is about bringing people closer to fame and really letting them feel it. But of course, within that, I mean, we have thousands of figures around the world because there's 28 of these attractions. So we have thousands and thousands of figures. Each one of the sites will have hundreds of figures, and each one of those figures represents somebody's personal brand or IP. So the sort of decision-making process that you go through is, we use data to keep an eye on trends and who's tracking and what's the right point to make an approach, because we work with most of the talent that we make the figures from. But then we work with the teams to understand what's important to them and what's the sort of moment in time that they want to represent. It's not always the same as the one that we do. If they have a movie coming out or an album, they want to represent the moment that they're in. Sometimes it's not the most iconic moment for them that we actually want to put in the attraction. But everything from what are they going to wear? What's the backdrop? What does their hair look like? All of that stuff, they're all different touch points. So understanding the sort of the essence of that person and what's special, and then the details that go into really making that feel authentic and credible.
Yep. And the last one we wanted to share is our Legoland park. So we have many Legoland parks around the world. Lego, obviously, an absolutely beloved brand. So there's a lot of responsibility there for us in taking this brand that almost, many children engage with around the world and creating an experience with it. The fascinating thing about this is, how do you create a big resort theme park that competes with Universal, that competes with Disney? And it really is about leaning into what makes this IP special, and that is the Lego brick, the building experience, playing and learning through play. And so what you'll see if you go to any of our Legoland parks is every park has a brick build experience. Everything is about those individual bricks, from our mini lands to our rides, and as I said, to the brick building experience itself. So yeah, we really focus when we look at these attractions and leaning into what is the essence, what is the thing that makes this brand so special. And yeah, we use that, we leverage it to create absolutely wonderful guest journeys. And the guest journey is always about the emotional experience that we're taking people on, right? And that's our third pillar, that you absolutely have to take your guests on a journey. And we spend a lot of time thinking about this. So I come from a writing and storytelling background. We do a lot of thinking about what's the beginning, middle, and end. But I like to think of our experiences as the hero's journey. And I think the roller coaster is the perfect metaphor for this, because in the hero's journey, you have somebody who has a call to action, declines it, then decides to go forward, goes on a quest, and at the end is somehow changed. And I think that's a perfect metaphor for a roller coaster, because if it's a terrifying one, you stand, you look at it, and you think, there is no way I'm going to go on that. It's so scary. Oh my gosh. But you build up the confidence to go on it. When you go on that ride, there's ups and downs, there's twists and turns, and then as the roller coaster finishes, you are in the denouement of the story. You're on the falling action, and then when you come off of it, you are changed because you've overcome something. And so I think that's one way of mapping it. We look at different ways of mapping those emotions when we are taking somebody through a sea life or a dungeons, for example, but we're always very conscious of mapping that out. And you can see sort of in that bottom graphic, that's an example of one of the types of journeys. And you can see we have rising action, falling action, rising action, falling action, until we reach this climax emotionally, and then you relax. And so we will look at each of the moments in the experience and map those moments against the emotions.
And I'll probably give two examples just because I think it brings that to life quite well, which is two very different examples. So the Dungeons brand, another brand that I worked on in my 10 years, which is the essence of that brand is scary fun, and it's actually quite binary in terms of how we build the experience, but there is some science behind it, which is the scary and funny bit do a very particular job. So you'll start with a bit of scare, and then a bit of funny to almost kind of calm down. But every time you do the scare, you build the scare up more and more. So you can get scarier and scarier as the attraction goes on. And then the last thing you do is you go in probably a ride that me and Megan are not going to go on, but like a drop ride, which is quite a terrifying ride. You can only really do that and get the amount of people through it that actually do, because you have a choice to go on it or not, if it comes at the end, after you've almost desensitize people to the fear. You keep building it up and keep building it up to then give them this kind of big finale, which is the end piece. So
I did do the drop ride.
Oh, you did? I did it once, and I was like, I've done it once. I can say I've done it. But I always like to think about, when we're thinking about the beginning and middle and end, that end bit, which is, what do you want people to look like when they're almost back out in the real world? Should they look like they've seen something amazing? Should they look like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that? And that's definitely a Dungeons moment, which is people are kind of almost out going, like, we did it. That was so scary. Can you believe how scary that was? But as I said, there's a bit of science and there's some deliberate stuff that we do when we plot that journey out. The other one, which is quite different, which is the London Eye, which is all about opening people's eyes to the city. That's a 30-minute flight around, and there are really key points of sort of emotion that you want people to feel. And if I just sort of simply explain what that is, it's you're starting and building anticipation. sort of on the way up. The pinnacle is this real moment of contemplation, and then on the way down, you're almost preparing them. I mean, it's all the money shot as they're coming back down. That's Houses of Parliament and a great view of the Thames, but you're actually sort of preparing them to sort of reconnect with the city as they exit the eye. So really different journeys and doing really different jobs and different considerations. So the brand and the individual brand essences, they absolutely dictate what that looks like. There's a new one we were talking about earlier.
Yes, I was just thinking about, so we've got a new one that we're working with right now. It's an IP that we can't reveal, but it's one that has a very kind of cheeky and funny tone of voice. So as we do the emotion mapping for that, we've called it clench and release. And so as we look at mapping each of the different experiences, we say, oh, you're building up, you have all this sort of tension, and then you give them a moment of release. And perhaps it aligns a little bit with the scary funny of the dungeons, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're always looking at sort of new ways to do this, but always kind of, you can always fall back on that standard storytelling, beginning, middle, and end, rising action, falling action, and knowing that we want people to be changed. And I think it's a lovely thing you said that because we do it as creative, and I think brand people, when we launch an attraction, we love to go on the first day and see people's reactions and see kind of how they come off of the ride or come out of the attraction or come out of the experience. And the reason we do it is we want to see people happy or terrified or excited. And yeah, we often measure the success by seeing how it is that they're reacting when they come off of it.
And it really is such a lovely and rewarding feeling when the thing that you hope that they've done, when you're planning all of this stuff on paper, when it actually comes to life and it works, it's a very good feeling.
And we work on long cycle projects, I should say. So, working on something could be anywhere from sort of 1 year to 3 years. So when you put so much into something, so much time, so much effort, it's always a little bit of a clench and release on the first day when you're waiting to see how everybody's going to react to it. So, yeah. Our fourth tip, something that is we really also spend a lot of time thinking about, is what it means to create something in real life. So, and what we mean by that is when we create experiences and we're working with brands, we have to think about how it is that we bring that brand to life and what it can do in real life that it can't do anywhere else. So what can that brand do in real life that it can't do on TV or in a book or in a magazine, or even another immersive experience, which is VR, right? So people will do immersive experiences where they're wearing VR goggles. So what do we do that's different from that? And I think the really important thing is it's about creating connections and creating touch points. And what we've learned is that the more kind of touch points and connections that there are in an experience, the higher the NPS score. And NPS score is often what we use to measure satisfaction. So basically, the more touch points and opportunities for engagement, the more people really enjoy the experiences. And a perfect example of that is our sea lives, which we've shown here. And what we've learned is that as people go through, the more opportunities to interact with our creatures within sea life that there are, or opportunities to interact with some of our guides, or people who will share facts about the creatures, the happier they are when they leave. And so when people are making connections, not only with our attractions and with our experiences, but one another, we know that that's something you can only do in real life and something that only our experiences can deliver.
And it's probably not surprising to hear this, but obviously there are lots of ways to experience brands virtually and through screens. One of the biggest drivers of our guests being satisfied is just engaging with people. So our staff play a really important role, and they have to embody the brand essence as well. And that's always such a key driver of our very satisfied guests and our very highest scoring NPS. So people, the real life interaction with people, not just with each other, like that's such a big driver of people leaving happy. And obviously a key point that is not in existence if you're not there in real life.
Yeah, and I think especially with social media today and people being, things that are supposed to be bringing people together, which are actually driving them apart, it's nice to kind of allow people to create real connections, especially sort of post-COVID. I'm sure that there's lots of conversations around that pent-up demand post-COVID, and people felt so separated from one another, so separated from the world, and what a wonderful thing for our attractions to be able to bring people together and connect even more.
Yeah.
Angela, I think you said that there was some research around the different pillars of how we know that people have enjoyed their experiences.
Yeah, so whenever we test, it comes through maybe slightly different language, but there's sort of 4 buckets that are drivers of people wanting to have experiences in our attractions in the real world, and the connection piece is really important. The togetherness piece, it sometimes shows up as, that's probably the biggest one that sits across all groups. You've then got betterment, and actually if you think about our Lego attractions, we have Legoland Parks and we have Legoland Discovery Centres, and they're all about the essence of that brand, which is playful learning. So that betterment piece of kind of feeling like you've come away kind of richer and better for it. Our Sea Lives do that as well. We'll kind of expose you and show you, about the world that lives under the ocean. The belonging piece as well, and I think that's a bit of the sort of fandom piece that we were talking about earlier. You can come to one of our attractions, and if you love the brand, you're going to meet other people that also love it as well. So sort of being in your fandom with like-minded people that's really motivating to people. And then a really obvious one, which is the escapism piece, which is people want to feel like they're not, very often it's an impossible thing that we're allowing them to do. On certain brands, that's one of the questions that I always asked. I mean, I think I did it yesterday. I was looking at something in a Madame Tussauds master plan, and it was for Las Vegas, and there was the neon graveyard, and I was like, but you can do that in the real life. Like, why? What's that got to do with Madame Tussauds, and how do you make that relevant, and how's that impossible if it's going to be shown in this attraction? So people are absolutely wanting to escape or have sort of an enhanced version of their reality when they come to the attractions. But those 4 buckets, as I said, the language changes slightly, but it comes back time and time again. Those are sort of our 4 sort of tenets of delivering great experiences.
Yep, and we know that if we do that, then we've hit our 5th secret ingredient, which is time well spent. So we really think about, when people leave this experience, will they have felt that they have had quality time, that they enjoyed it, that they made connections with the experience with one another. And if they have, then we know that we've achieved our goal. So a lot of our thinking is really audience-centric. It is very easy to get wrapped up in the creative, get wrapped up in the brand, get wrapped up in the idea. And we often have to check ourselves and pull ourselves back and make sure that we're testing and learning and understanding, that we're using data, we're using insights, and we're really understanding where we can that we are delivering this time well spent to our audiences. And often time well spent is not just about connections. They like to walk away with a souvenir or with a memory of something to remind them of this. Angela and I were talking on the train right up here about how both of us have had the experience where we say, oh, well, I work at Merlin, it's Alton Towers, it's Chessington, and people will say, oh, I remember my first trip to Alton Towers 20 years ago, and I went with my family, or I brought my kids for the first time, and oh, I remember this happened, and you think, wow, we are actually sort of creating and gifting people memories. And so not only are we creating stories in our attractions, but we are sort of gifting stories that people tell themselves, they tell their families, they'll tell strangers 20 years later around the experiences they had, and what a wonderful thing to create and to deliver.
We were talking about, giving guests something to take away and remind them. There's obviously their memories, which can last a lifetime for them. I definitely meet people that say, I went to Legoland, and then I moved to Chessington, and then Thorpe, and then Alton Towers, and that's deliberate, by the way, that you grow up through the brands, but it's almost sort of the sort of story of their childhoods. But as well as the sort of the actual intangible stuff, people actually want to take stuff with them as well as kind of a little memento. That's why exit through the gift shop is a thing. But I think what's really interesting is is, I mean, all attractions, for commercial reasons, will sell you a photo of you having that experience. And we always try and innovate. We're always like, not just a picture, like a picture feels really old-fashioned. And we put all of these products in, digital products and lots of kind of other things that you could take away. People want the picture. It's the best-selling thing because that's the thing that is the memory of their day. So we won't give up in trying to innovate, but I'm like, that serves a purpose, which is that's a memento of the day that they want to keep.
So we hope that we've delivered time well spent to you all and that you've enjoyed it. Keep these 5 tips in your pockets. And if you have any questions, we're very happy to answer them for you. But equally, we don't want to keep everybody from, be the barrier between everyone and their last cocktail or Gareth Southgate.
Hi.
Hi.
So I absolutely adore the work that you guys do. I think, especially growing up around lots of theme parks as well, the idea of having the concepts be so clear to like a child and kind of seeing the world that you've wanted to see growing up come to life in front of you is absolutely remarkable. I wanted to ask, how do you typically handle budget restrictions when it comes to ideas? Because of course, I saw one of the IPs was Shrek, which is absolutely loved, and there's so many ways you could go about his swamp, his journey to far, far away, and all things like that. But in terms of bringing that concept to life, in terms of actual materials and manpower, and like how do you handle budgeting but still delivering the idea that comes with it?
I mean, that's definitely the right question to ask. That's that's the real piece of tension in all of our projects. Because of course, these things, because they're so exciting, can be huge. And like, where do you stop? I mean, I think when you're working with a partner, if it's an IP partner, you have to have a great relationship and agree up front what's most important. I mean, it's the same principle actually. If it's your own brand, I need to know as the writer of the brief when we're having our conversations, and then the people that come in and build it, and they're like, you can't have all of that. Like, we have to be lined up on what's the stuff that we would fight for. I think possibly I said that yesterday, which is like, that's the thing I would fight for. I probably wouldn't cry if we didn't have that thing. But you have to be really clear up front. And that's that point about like really distilling a brand down to its essence. And part of that is almost kind of knowing what the sort of the assets are that sort of non-negotiable, or the experiences that are non-negotiable. I think it was on one of our previous slides, but we were talking about sort of immersion and interactivity, and sometimes getting the balance of that right, because you can spend all your money on immersion, and that's really important for guests, but actually them doing something is equally as important. So sometimes I feel like we sort of have to trade a little bit off there just to make sure the guest is doing something, as opposed to just, I'm in a really beautifully themed corridor and I'm going to keep walking. But I would say, from my perspective in my job, it's just knowing up front the stuff that is really important to me, that I'm going to fight for, on the stuff, and I might not tell everybody the stuff I'll compromise on, but I'll have it in my own head.
Yeah, from a creative perspective, we try to have the discipline of designing to budget. We are always given a budget at first, and we try to generally color in the lines around a budget. But we also like to have a big vision, and so sometimes our ideas go slightly over budget. But creatively, what we always do, what we try to do in every concept that we put forward, is understand what are the elements that without that thing, it doesn't work. So what are truly the key core components that deliver on the product truth, that deliver on the proposition? It always goes back to the proposition. So what are the parts of this experience that deliver on the proposition, without which the entire thing will not be successful? And you have to know that, because those are the things that when you say, okay, we need to peel back budget on this or this, those are the things, as Angela says, that you can't compromise on, because without them, the story doesn't work. There's a beginning and end and no middle, for example.
And also, I think we showed that picture earlier of the Jumanji land that was built in Italy and in Chessington, and it was really clear up front, wasn't it? The giant jaguar's head was really important to them, and it was really important to us because that actually became a really key part of how we communicate it, because that's the shorthand to the IP. So there's lots of different things that drive the bits that you fight for, but it's a real thing. Like that's a real conversation, I think, on every project I have ever worked on, which is nobody ever comes in and says, you've got more money, like you haven't spent it, or it's always that you haven't got enough, something's going to have to give somewhere.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, how do you even begin to work in this industry? Because like, when I'm looking at what you're doing,
I'm so sorry, I can't hear you.
Hi.
Hi.
There we go.
How do you even begin to work in the industry? Like, when I see what you're doing, I don't even know what to Google in terms of like job description, or I don't know, I'm imagining there's like a whole team that like does different roles. I don't even know about that. Like, how can I know more?
So, just so I made sure I understand the question, how did we end up in this industry? What's the path to working in these roles?
Yeah.
Yes, so, as I said, I've been in the role for a year, and Angela's been in it in the business for much longer, and we have very, very, very different backgrounds. So my background is, as I said, I've got a writing background, a storytelling background, but I have worked in the music industry, I've worked in the TV industry, I have a very digital background, I've worked in podcasts, so I've got an extremely varied sort of set of experiences, but the through line for me in my career has always been storytelling. And so every media, every industry that I've worked in, I've always kind of focused on how do you take a story and sort of bring that to life in whatever medium it might be. As I said, I also have a digital background, and what's quite interesting is, experiences are, moving now. We showed you Abba Voyage, and we're looking at sort of how we integrate digital overlays. So I think for me, I specifically came into this role because my skills at that moment matched sort of the trajectory of the industry. There are many, many people who work on my team who spent their entire childhoods dreaming about how they would, design roller coasters. And actually, there's an article in The Guardian about some of my team members who actually, when it was the 10-year anniversary, I think, or 20-year anniversary of Roller Coaster Idol, the game, they had all played it as kids and used that as a way to train to build theme parks and to build roller coasters. So I think there's a lot of different ways that you come into the business. And my team is made up of creatives from gaming backgrounds, from advertising agencies, from television. There's quite a few people in the television industry, but the through line is understanding creative, understanding storytelling, and having a passion for bringing brands to life. So I think there can be a very squiggly path, and there's no sort of one way to do it.
I definitely had a squiggly path coming in. My background is quite different. I had spent all of my career up until this point working in fashion retail. So I worked for H&M, I worked for Gap, and I worked for Selfridges, all in marketing roles. It was kind of relevant, but I don't think I really realized at the time. I mean, it was relevant because I worked in brand roles, and those are real spaces and real people are in them, and I did a lot of kind of events and experiential. I almost fell into Merlin by accident. One of my bosses at Selfridges came in and said, I've got this role. It's a bit irresponsible of me, actually. She was like, I've got a role, it's working with Lego. And I was like, I love Lego. And I'll take the job. I didn't even ask what the job was. And then I kind of turned up and I was like, what am I doing here? And actually it all made sense though, because my job was, and always has been, it's just in a different sector now, which was bringing brands to life in a real space. But I have one of my team sat in the front row here who's 2 months in today, and Nikita comes from an agency background. There's not one way in, and actually it's I think we're richer for having people that come from different backgrounds, but I think just caring about the stuff that we're talking about today is a really good head start. But I think there's lots and lots of different ways into what is a really, really rewarding industry. I mean, I talked about the purpose earlier. That's like, we make people happy for a day job. Like, what a lovely thing.
Yeah, what an amazing thing to spend your time doing.
Yep.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Hello. Okay. Hi. As you said, you've got experience in TV. As someone who's just graduating, who is graduating with film and TV and radio as part of the university course, how exactly would you get into the advertisements, as you said, with storytelling telling the story of the roller coasters? How exactly would you get into the advertisement of actually helping out with the production of roller coasters?
Did you get?
No, I'm so sorry. We couldn't hear. I was waiting for Megan to almost tell me off what I did last time. I'm sorry, we can't hear very well.
Okay. As you said, you've got TV experience. As someone who is graduating with film and TV experience as part of university, how exactly do you get into TV, into the advertisement, especially with, as you said, it's all about storytelling, getting the story of the roller coasters across?
So how do you go from TV into this industry?
Yeah, especially with, as you said, with Merlin, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of, when I joined Merlin, I was really surprised at the number of people from the TV industry who work at Merlin. I think it's probably the largest cohort of people from other industries that come from there. So I didn't study TV and film. It's not my background, but I think, you know, again, if you understand storytelling, then that's the easiest way in. When we design experiences, we are looking at all the things that you'll be studying in university when you look at kind of script writing, when you look at kind of structure of televisions, TV shows with 3 acts in it, beginning, middle, and end. All of that stuff translates. So, I mean, I don't think there's any sort of, you know, magic path or magic way in, but I think that if you were to, you know, apply or look at working in a place like Merlin with a background in TV or a background in advertising, you wouldn't be immediately discounted. I think people would look at that and think, oh yeah, that's an immediately translatable set of skills.
Yeah, it's really relevant. I mean, we have 2 members on our executive board who come from TV backgrounds. We have lots of people that come from the BBC. It's very relevant. There's a lot of synergy and there's a lot of transferable stuff. So it's a really great place to start if that was, you know, if this was a place that somebody wanted to end up in this sort of the attractions industry. That's a good fit.
Yeah, and look, I think Merlin has to pull people from lots of different industries because there's not a lot of companies in the UK that do this. You know, we're one of the only players in the theme park world here in the UK. There are some smaller companies that are creating attractions, but you know, we have to pull people from other disciplines. So, as I said, I think it's easily translatable and wouldn't be a surprise at all.
Yep.
I think if you were to looking at working in this industry, it's just about leaning into those skills and demonstrating the skills that you have that are transferable.
Yeah.
It looks like that's all the time we've got, so thank you all very much for staying. We've appreciated it. We know we're the last ones today, so we hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you keep those tips in your pockets, and again, we hope we've delivered time well spent to you all. Thank you.
Thank you.